Andrew would declare that this kind of spelling would give insight into the inner meaning of the word, that the word itself carried its own meaning. This was his gospel, as he would say, and he would take the word gospel and say, go spell. From his point of view, the words themselves were signs that described their own nature. In other words, their secret, the secret of words, is in plain sight. He would also do any and all kinds of word game where letters were, rearranged in different ways. Now, he didn't do crossword puzzles, mind you, but other sorts of kind of word gymnastics. Andrew had very little money, and true to his Scottish heritage, was somewhat frugal on top of that. He lived until the very last months of his life in a tiny room in a boarding house. The few belongings he had in his almost empty room were always neatly placed. He loved to read newspapers, and in particular the fresh news of the day, but there was a special twist. And again, this is kind of far out. It seemed that whatever happened on a national or international level would also happen to Andrew in his life at the personal level that very day. For example, when race riots broke out in Detroit, that same day black youths broke into Andrew's tiny room and destroyed some things. Andrew was totally aware of this, and he felt it represented a level of consciousness he had earned by burning off various obscurations. Just like we astrologers say that the cosmic dance up in the heavens is acted down here on earth at the same time. With Andrew, what happened in the news on earth that day seemed to happen to him personally and daily. Now, of course, I found this remarkable. Another thing Andrew would say, it's the imperfections that kept him still around on this earth. And he would show his slightly bent little finger. He had a little finger that had like a little crook in it from something or other, an injury. This imperfection, he would say, helped to keep him from passing on, from dying. I never knew if he was just kidding me or using this example to instruct me in one of his life secrets. I was always the listener, the rapt student, but it often took me real time to grasp the meaning of what he presented, sometimes years. And Andrew was an expert on just about every business establishment in Ann Arbor, at least around the campus. He made a point of visiting them all and would not stand for bad service or the deterioration of service. He was always completely vocal about this sort of thing and would make his observations known to the management. And if unanswered, he would avoid the place completely. I would not like to own one of those businesses that Andrew shunned. They're all gone today. There's no question that Andrew McIver was a protector being, perhaps what the Tibetan Buddhists call a Dharma protector. He was fierce, although his indignation at those who harmed others never burned anyone. He was pure living fire, but a fire that could not burn or did not burn. The correct term for what Andrew often exhibited would be righteous wrath. Wrath at all and everything that obstructed and obscured the pure flowing of the life force. Perhaps you could imagine encountering a 5-foot figure in his 80s on the campus of a university and casting this old man a condescending, kindly glance, only to be suddenly eye to eye with the most vital force in the universe. Trust me, that's unforgettable, I assure you. And I'll mention this just once. Andrew was with us, but not one of us, in that his personality, to the best of my ability, and I'm an expert critic, I'm super critical, his personality had no shadow. He cast no shadow. And he was so perfectly clear that his presence was like a window in this dream that I had, that I call my life, a window through which I could, for a time when I knew him, gaze. He was only there to help. Aside from that, he was not there at all. Do you get it? Andrew had once had a chance meeting with the governor of the state of Michigan, who greeted Andrew as if he was one more doddering senior citizen in a group of elders. "And how are you?" Governor Romney said in his obsequious politic voice. Andrew instantly responded, "It's not how are you, but who are you that matters," he replied, and the governor was in complete confusion. He was eye to eye with Andrew, which was not like anything. It's not like anything I've ever experienced. Andrew was very, very careful with what he ate. Over his quite long life, he had tried eating almost everything, and he learned what each thing did to his system. He could tell you exactly what certain foods would do to his body. It would produce a boil here, a little rash here. For example, I can remember this brand of tomato soup would cause a small rash down here on this part of his right ankle, and so on. He ate very, very simply, and he would cook food for me once in a while. He taught me how to boil coffee by dropping the grounds into boiling water, turning off the heat at once, and covering the pan. We would often drink coffee together. Andrew had real powers. I could recall many times when I would approach Andrew at a time when I was in a bad mood. Andrew, of course, could sense this at once and would always tell some story that led to an emphatic action of some kind on his part. He would be talking along and getting more and more crisp about some point when he would take his newspaper that he usually carried and he would bring it down sharply on his hand, like, or on the edge of a table, or something like that, whack. The instant he did that, at that precise point where the sharp sound occurred, my headache or my bad, foul mood would just vanish. It was gone. Andrew did this all the time, like swatting a fly. Now, he must have had many students, and I've met some of them, and who have benefited from his presence. I only knew a few of his other students personally. As time went on, Andrew and I became almost inseparable. On Andrew's death on March 9th of 1969, I was the one who worked with the police, contacted his sister in Scotland, his only remaining kin, and saw to his burial. Andrew was buried in the Forest Hills Cemetery near the corner of Observatory Street and Geddes Road in Ann Arbor, up near the student dorms on the hill. I saw to this, and I designed a tall granite stone, which I'll show you here, with the symbol of the sun on it, a circle with the dot in the center. I enclose it. He would have loved that. If you want to visit his grave, it can be found just inside the fence near the sidewalk along Geddes Road, about 3 blocks from the cemetery entrance and to the south. I often visit there when I'm in Ann Arbor and say some prayers or just sit there for a while. Okay, I've told you something about Andrew, but for me the most important point was that in Andrew I had found an individual, a person who had no shadow, no personality flaw of any kind that I, with my kind of outsized critical eye, could discover. Andrew was absolutely transparent and empty, as far as obscurations were concerned. He had none that I could see, and I had looked, you can be sure. And yet his mind was as vivid and lucid as a cloudless sky. As mentioned, you could see right through him into yourself. He was a perfect mirror. And it was through him that I first saw myself as maybe I am. I could finally see the future of myself, or at least that I might have one. It was clear when I met Andrew, and this is a key point, that this man cared more for me than I knew how to care for myself, than I cared for my own self. I sensed this, and trust and confidence arose within me. I mean, like for the first time in my adult experience. The first time that I ever felt like I could take in another person, that I didn't have to protect myself from everything outside. Through Andrew, I could see clearly, and I was able to open my heart to him with no reservations. And with that gesture, much of my fear of other persons just ceased, it vanished. I stopped being hung up on other persons' personal faults. This is not to say that I stopped recognizing flaws in those around me, but rather that I was no longer afraid that others could somehow infect me if I learned from them, that I would somehow end up like them if I listened to them. Andrew McIver was like a pole star in the general direction of my life, something that I could follow. Because he was authentic, genuine, I was able to trust my own judgment because I had with me now the experience of the real deal, a fully realized being who, once known, left no doubt in me about who was a poser and who was not among those around me. Once I had encountered someone like Andrew, I could never again get caught up with those who were just pretending to know. Up to then, I had no idea who knew and who was pretending. But now I knew the difference, and knowing that, I could begin to have compassion for those who just pretended, as opposed to fearing them, debating them, or thinking that whatever they were might be contagious, and I didn't want to get it. Anyway, that knowledge through Andrew made all the difference. Now this is another section I want to talk about, something about the teachings that Andrew gave. And this is going to be not just a story, but more like an esoteric teaching, some of the teachings that he actually gave. So it may be something you like and it may be something you don't like. So, but I want to give you at least a taste of his teachings. As I get right down to doing, it's clear to me that these teachings are not only very useful and profound, but also very, very difficult to realize it experientially. There's a long journey between grasping these concepts that I'm going to present vaguely with your mental understanding and realizing that they are actually true, much less living those things consciously. This is what is called esoteric or occult or hidden doctrine. And it's this kind of learning that has been passed down through the centuries, usually from mouth to ear, not because it's a secret or that it's forbidden, but rather because it's self-secret. It's hidden from ourselves by our own ignorance, by our own unwillingness or inability to grasp it, to learn it. So these kind of teachings are hidden, but they're hidden in plain sight. That's the one place we would never think to look. Andrew McIver was very much about what are called climactic life events, pivotal points of change on which our life turns, times when there's a definite before, during, and after. These kind of events, of life events, are often called rites of passage or life passages. They're gates we each pass through, whether we are aware of it or not. Andrew called these passages initiations, and he would often say, "We are all initiates, Michael, but it's a question of degree. To what degree are we initiated?" Andrew's view was that each of us goes through and experiences all of life's passages, initiations, experiences them fully. All of us do, but most often with little to no awareness of what's happening to us, and thus ultimately no memory of the event. It was never consciously recorded. To Andrew, being there, being conscious, being present, being now during climactic events, life-changing events, made all the difference. Someone has to be recorded. Remember, he was a recorder of the dead. Someone has to record our own death. Someone has to record our own life, and it's gonna be us, right? Or we can just snooze through it. This is perhaps why he was so fascinated by Buddhism. Because as we know, the word Buddha, Sanskrit word, simply means awareness. Gaining awareness of what we're going through in our life was very important to Andrew. Recognizing these great life events or rites of passage are so important, but even more important is celebrating them. So much of these deeper life initiations are never spoken of in public, much less actually acknowledged and celebrated. It would seem that in these climactic times, these times of passage and change, each of us celebrates our own most intimate self secretly, privately, perhaps with almost no celebration at all, no one to celebrate it with. I've always found this very sad, especially because, as far as I can tell, it's unnecessary, but it's still true. Now, Andrew was also very aware of astrology, and in particular the motion of the great timekeeper planet Saturn. The planet Saturn completes its first circle of the zodiac and returns to its original birthplace in the zodiac around 30 years of age. According to Andrew, one of the key or main life passages, climactic events, is that first Saturn return. Actually, it's about 29.4 years. I think we all know the old phrase, never trust anyone over 30. Well, he felt there was a reason for that. The area of time in our late 20s and early 30s marks a great life initiation, a great passing, a great life passage. Andrew used to say that 33 was the year that Christ died. And he would also point out that 33 is when ice melts, and that there's a 33rd degree of Freemasonry, and so on. In life, the 33rd degree or year marks a pivotal change for every person, although most of us have only a dim awareness of it at the time. And although we all experience our Saturn return, this rite of passage happens to us all, not many of us do it consciously, not with full awareness of what we're doing, what we're going through. Instead, we tend to sleepwalk through these life changes, and we miss or we manage to ignore these important inner passages or events. Andrew McIver was very much into helping people, especially young people, go through these rites of passage consciously and with full awareness. He wanted to help you to do this before you were 30 rather than sometime later on. Awareness is everything. That was his view. So you can see it was quite natural for me to eventually wander into Buddhism, which is all about being more aware. Andrew wanted those people who were under 30 years of age to go through the great Saturn initiation with their eyes open, and not blindly or ignorantly ignoring, not asleep in their bodies at that crucial time. His philosophy was very much one of go and meet your maker consciously rather than be dragged into awareness reluctantly. You know, one of the things he said so frequently, said it to me a lot. Michael, if you spend all of your time in a sideshow, the main tent's going to be gone. Of course, he's talking about a circus, but what a great life lesson. If you spend all of your time in the sideshow, the main tent will be gone. Waking up was what Andrew McIver was all about, and there's much more, and it gets lots deeper. I can't go into it all there. There's different ways that I've written a lot about this that you could read, and slowly I'll turn some of it into videos. I will present two esoteric truths for you to consider here, and I warn you that these are not easy to grasp and may appear to some of you as pure nonsense. But I urge you not to jump to conclusions. Another thing you would say, none of us are interested in jumping to conclusions, like getting to the end of our life and dying. So relax and just let these concepts kind of roll over you and let them do their work a bit. Thinking won't help you here. These concepts work internally on their own. So for now, I'll just attempt to point them out, and you'll either get a glimpse of them or you won't. Now, the first esoteric concept is that all of the hoo-ha about being born again, a born-again Christian, is nothing other than becoming aware of this great rite of passage that takes place around the 30th year. Although Christians have claimed it for their own, there is nothing particularly Christian about being born again. In fact, we're all born again by virtue of living beyond the age of 30. But here's the wrinkle: not all of us are equally aware of it. When we do become aware of this huge change, that's what's called being born again. Again, awareness of these events is always the key. Awareness is the key, not whether you experience the event. We all do this. We all experience this passage, but most of us can't remember it. We never recorded it. We can't play it back. We have no memory. And while it's perhaps best to have this awareness of being born again, actually while you're going through the rite of passage at around 30 years of age, as mentioned, because it is an event that it happens to each of us. We can, however, become aware of it at any time after the age 30. In other words, we can also realize that we have been born again any time later on in our life. It's like those kernels of popcorn that pop after all the rest are done. It's never too late to wake up. However, I should point out that this waking up, this particular awareness that I'm speaking of, this being born again idea, can happen only once. Doesn't happen to us over and over and over, because it's what's defined or called a realization. It's not something that you can repeat. Once you get it, you got it. The fact that once you have experienced it, you will never forget it. It's indeed, in the true sense of the word, an unforgettable experience.